My name is Alexandra Carter. I'm 26 years old, and I've been a rookie officer with the Chicago Police Department for only 6 months. I grew up in a family of police officers. My father, Frank Carter, is a sergeant with 30 years of service, and my older brother, Michael, has been on the force for 5 years. You can imagine the pressure I feel every day to prove myself. That Thursday morning, the Chicago sky was heavy with gray clouds that promised a storm. I adjusted my tactical belt as I looked at myself in the women's locker room mirror. My brown hair was tied back in a tight bun beneath my cap, and my dark blue uniform was impeccable. I always made sure of that. Perhaps it was a compensatory effort, an attempt to appear more experienced than I actually was. "Carter, briefing in 5 minutes." Sergeant Monroe's voice echoed through the hallway. I took a deep breath, checking my gear once more. Holster secure, radio charged, flashlight, spray, handcuffs, everything in its proper place. I took one last look in the mirror. Determined green eyes stared back at me. At the briefing, the sergeant distributed the day's tasks. To my surprise, my father was there, even though he usually worked in another district. His presence always made me nervous, as if my every move were being scrutinized. "We have a special operation today," Monroe announced. "Roosevelt Mall is hosting a store opening event, and 5,000 people are expected to be there. We need a visible but discreet police presence." Roosevelt Mall was the city's largest shopping center, a gigantic 13-story complex that opened just a year earlier. It was an architectural pride of Chicago, with its glass walls and futuristic structure. "We'll form teams of 2, the sergeant continued. "Carter and ... Carter." My stomach sank. My dad and I together for an 8-hour shift. I glanced at him quickly and saw his jaw tighten. He wasn't any happier about this than I was. As the other officers received their assignments, my father approached, his blue eyes as cold as ever. "Alex, let's get a few things straight. No winging it today, got it? You follow protocol word for word." I nodded, biting my tongue to keep from responding. We'd had this conversation dozens of times since I graduated from the academy. According to him, I was too impulsive, too trusting of my instincts. According to me, he was too stuck in the old rules. In the patrol car on the way to the mall, the silence was heavy. My father drove, as always, controlling everything. I stared out the window, watching the raindrops begin to dot the glass. "How is your mother?" I asked finally, trying to ease the tension. "Well, she asked when you're going to visit her. Maybe on Sunday. She would like that." More silence. It had always been like this between us, especially after I chose to pursue a career in law enforcement. My father never wanted that for me, not because it was dangerous, but because, in his own words, policing is a man's job. Outdated, I know, but that was his generation. We arrived at Roosevelt Mall shortly after 10 a.m. The rain was falling harder now, causing more people to seek refuge inside the mall. The parking lot was full, and lines were forming at the entrance. "We'll do an initial reconnaissance sweep," my father said, parking the car in the patrol car bay. "Then we'll split up. You take floors 10 through 13, and I'll cover the ground floor through the night." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "Do you want me to stay alone on the upper floor?" He gave me an impatient look. "Isn't that what you wanted? More responsibility? Besides, the upper floors are quieter, less busy." I understood the message between the lines. He gave me the easy floors, far from any real problems. "Typical." "Right," I replied dryly. We entered the mall through the service entrance, flashing our badges. The security manager, a burly man named Dawson, greeted us with evident relief. "Thank you for coming. We're expecting huge crowds today. All our teams are on standby, but with the recent history of thefts ... we'll take care of it." My father interrupted in his authoritative voice. "Show us to the command center." We followed Dawson to a back room on the first floor, lined with monitors showing security cameras. 2 security guards monitored the screen, while others came and went, reporting over the radio. "Impressive," I commented, looking at the system. "Newly updated," Dawson explained proudly. "We have 97% coverage of the mall, except for a few technical blind spots in the maintenance area." My father examined the monitors with professional attention. "Any pattern in the recent thefts?" "Yes, actually. Mainly jewelry and electronics stores. always between 12 and 2 p.m. lunchtime, when we have the highest flow of people. We suspect an organized gang. I spent the next 30 minutes familiarizing myself with the mall map, memorizing emergency exits, service, elevators, and critical points. Meanwhile, my dad talked to Dawson about safety protocols. At 11:30 a.m., we began our rounds. The mall was bustling with activity, with families, teenagers, and seniors milling about the stores decorated for the special event. Background music played through the speakers, mingling with the constant hum of thousands of conversations. "Keep your radio on channel 3, my father instructed, as we approached the central elevators. "Report anything suspicious. And Alex, Alex, I know, no heroics." He studied me for a moment, his eyes meeting mine. I was about to say careful, but that works too. We stepped into the panoramic elevator, a glass tube that ascended through the center of the mall, offering stunning views from every floor. As we ascended, I watched the crowd below thin out. On the 10th floor, I stepped out of the elevator with a brief wave to my father, who continued upward. I adjusted my radio and began my patrol, walking slowly down the circular corridor, checking out the shop's mostly expensive restaurants and a few exclusive boutiques on this level. The feeling of finally being on my own, in charge of my own area, was simultaneously liberating and intimidating. As much as I complained about my father's constant supervision, there was comfort in knowing he was there to correct me if I made a mistake. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. I made friends with some shopkeepers, played with children curious about my uniform, and guided lost tourists. It was basic police work, but it gave me satisfaction. This was why I joined the force, to help people, to make a difference in their daily lives. By noon, the entire mall seemed to have doubled in activity. My radio crackled occasionally with communications from other officers stationed on the lower floors, reporting minor incidents, a lost child, an argument between customers, nothing serious. On the 11th floor, I stopped to buy a coffee. The barista, a young woman with purple hair, smiled as I approached. "On the house, officer," she said, handing me a steaming cup. "Thank you, but I can't accept," I replied politely. "Department rules." "Oh, sorry. I didn't know." I paid for the coffee and walked away, savoring the strong flavor. Small gestures like this were common. Many people genuinely respected and appreciated the police, something we sometimes forgot amidst so much criticism. My radio came to life. "All units be alert for possible suspicious activity on the 2nd floor, East Sector, near Tiffany Jewelry Store. 3 individuals, 2 men and 1 woman. Erratic behavior." I recognized my father's voice. Instinctively, I started toward the elevators before remembering my assignment. This wasn't my area of expertise. Reluctantly, I returned to my roots, but kept the radio close, listening to the development. At 12:45 p.m., I arrived on the 13th floor, the mall's top floor. It was noticeably emptier than the others, with several stores still closed, awaiting tenants. A large open central area served as an exclude court, with panoramic views of the city through a glass ceiling. The rain was now falling heavily, turning the transparent roof into a screen of moving water. Only 2 restaurants were open, an upscale cafe and a Japanese restaurant. A few tables were occupied, mostly by executives on lunch breaks. As I walked through the area, I noticed a man sitting alone, staring intently at his phone. Something about him seemed off. Maybe it was the way his eyes kept darting around, or the way his leg bounced nervously under the table. I decided to observe him for a while, positioning myself casually near a column. He wore an expensive suit, but his hands were restless, drumming on the table. My gut told me something wasn't right, but there was nothing concrete to justify an approach. I wondered if I was just seeking action in my quiet area, while the real target was the jewelry store on the 2nd floor. The radio crackled again. False alarm on the 2nd floor. Suspects identified as confused tourists. Situation resolved. I could almost hear the disappointment in my father's voice. I smiled involuntarily. That's when I noticed another man entering the floor via the north elevator. He walked directly to the suited man's desk and sat down quickly. They exchanged a few words, looking tense. My professional curiosity, I mentally described the first, around 40, with graying hair at the temples, a well-cut gray suit. The newcomer? Younger, maybe 30, wearing a black leather jacket, jeans, and a visible tattoo on his neck. Discreetly, I approached the cafe and ordered a water, positioning myself so I could hear fragments of the conversation. It wasn't what we agreed, said the man in the suit, his voice low but intense. Change of plans. Boss wants it today. It's crazy. There are cops everywhere, precisely for that reason. Nobody expects that. They noticed my presence and immediately fell silent. The man in the jacket gave me an appraising look that sent a chill down my spine. He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I casually walked away, pretending to observe the view out the window. My mind raced. This sounded like a conversation about some kind of criminal operation. Should I call for backup? Report it to my father? But what if I was wrong? What if it was just a tense business meeting? My father would never let me live it down. If I raised a false alarm, I decided to keep watching. The two men were now speaking in even lower tones, leaning over the table. The man in the suit seemed increasingly agitated. Just then, my radio crackled, too loud in the relative silence of the 13th floor. Carter's status report. It was my father. Both men looked in my direction immediately. I took a few steps back and replied, "Everything quiet on the 13th. Only regular customers." There was a pause. Understood. Keep watch. When I turned my attention back to the table, the man in the jacket had disappeared. The one in the suit was hurriedly paying the bill. Damn, I'd missed my chance. He stood and walked quickly toward the north elevator. I decided to follow him at a distance. If my instincts were correct, something was about to happen, and I needed to find out what. The man pressed the elevator button, nervously glancing at his watch. I stood a few feet away, pretending to check my phone. Our eyes met briefly in the reflection of the elevator's metal doors. The doors opened and he stepped inside. At the last second, I decided to board too. The surprise on his face was momentary, but unmistakable. "Good afternoon," I greeted professionally, positioning myself in the opposite corner. He nodded stiffly. "Officer." The elevator started to descend. 12th floor, 11th floor. "Quite busy today, isn't it?" I commented casually. "Yes," he replied dryly, without looking at me. 10th floor, 9th floor. Then, everything happened in rapid succession. Between the 9th and 8th floors, the elevator lights flickered. A muffled rumble sounded somewhere above us. The elevator shook violently, sending us reeling. Then, total darkness. The elevator stopped abruptly. Instinctively, I reached for my holster. In the darkness, I heard the man's rapid breathing. "Stay calm," I instructed, my voice steady despite my own racing heart. It must just be a power outage. The emergency lights came on, bathing the cabin in a dim red glow. From the blinking digital display, I saw that we were trapped between the 8th and 7th floors. I immediately pressed the emergency button. Nothing happened. I tried my radio. "This is Carter. I'm stuck in the north elevator between floors 8 and 7. Possible electrical failure? Anyone listening?" Only static responded. The man in the suit was visibly distraught now, his forehead glistening with sweat under the red light. "This shouldn't happen," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "What? Shouldn't happen?" I asked, suddenly alert. He looked at me, seeming to make a decision. "Officer, I think we have a big problem." Before I could elaborate, we heard a distant explosion, followed by muffled screams coming from somewhere in the mall. The elevator car shook again. "What's going on?" I demanded, my gun now in hand, though not yet pointed at him. The man raised his hands defensively. "My name is Robert Mercer. I'm an FBI agent," he declared. "We're in the middle of an operation that appears to have gotten out of hand." I stared at him skeptically. "Show me your identification." Slowly, with deliberate movement, he reached into his inside jacket pocket and removed a badge and an identification card. In the dim light, I examined them carefully. They looked authentic. "Why is an FBI agent undercover at Roosevelt Mall?" I asked, still keeping my distance. Mercer sighed, seeming to make a decision. "We're tracking a domestic terrorist cell called Division 13. They were planning an attack today, but we thought we had the situation under control. I was meeting with an informant, the man in the jacket. Yes, he's a low-ranking member of the group turned informant. He told me plans had changed, that the attack would be today instead of the scheduled date. I was about to notify my team when He gestured to the stalled elevator. That's no coincidence, I concluded, feeling a chill run down my spine. No, I think we were discovered, and this is part of the attack. I tried to process the information. If he was telling the truth, we were in the middle of a much more serious situation than shoplifting. What's their target? I asked, putting my gun away but keeping my hand close to the holster. The entire mall. They plan to detonate explosives at key structural points, causing panic and potentially a partial collapse. Another explosion, this one closer, shook the elevator. I need to contact my superior, he said, picking up the radio again, and trying different channels, nothing but static. They must be using some kind of signal jammer, Mercer explained, now scanning the elevator walls. We need to get out of here. He was right. If what he said was true, every minute stuck in that elevator meant lives were at risk outside. Is there an emergency hatch? I asked, looking up at the ceiling. There, he pointed to a square panel above us. I quickly assessed the situation. The hatch was at least 8 feet high. Even at 5 feet 9, I'd need support to reach it. I'm going to need to climb on your shoulders, I said, already removing my tactical belt to make myself lighter. Mercer nodded, positioning himself under the hatch and intertwining his fingers for support. With a push, I climbed onto his hands and then onto his shoulders, balancing precariously. Steady? I asked. Yes, he replied, his voice strained with effort. Stretching as far as I could, I managed to reach the hatch. It was heavy, but with a determined push, I managed to open it. A draft of cold air filled the elevator. With another push, I hoisted myself upward, emerging at the top of the cabin. The elevator shaft was nearly pitch black except for a few emergency lights along the walls. The smell of smoke was strongest here. What do you see? Mercer called from below. We're between floors, I replied, looking around. There's a door to the 8th floor about a meter above us. Reaching back into the opening, I helped Mercer climb in. Together, we surveyed our situation. We need to force that door, he said, pointing to the 8th floor exit. The space was cramped and dangerous. One false move and we would fall into the pit. Slowly, we moved along the metal structure supporting the cabin, using the cables and beams for support. When we reached the door, we discovered our next challenge. It was locked from the outside. There's an emergency lever, Mercer said, pointing to a red mechanism beside the door. Stretching dangerously over the void, I managed to reach it. With a strong pull, I heard a mechanical click. Mercer immediately began prying the door open with his fingers, creating a small gap. Help me here, he asked, and together we pushed the doors open wide enough for us to pass through. We emerged into the 8th floor corridor, panting and covered in dust and grease. The scene we found was chaotic. Emergency lights flashed, alarms blared, and a thin layer of smoke hung in the air. People ran in every direction, some screaming. Immediately, I went back into police mode. Police? I yelled, raising my badge. Everyone keep calm. Proceed to the emergency exits in an orderly manner. A few people stopped, looking at me with expressions that mixed relief and panic. What's going on? Asked a woman holding a small child. Evacuate the building immediately, I instructed, pointing to the green exit sign at the end of the hallway. Stay away from the elevators. Mercer was already in action, helping elderly people and directing the flow to the emergency stairs. We worked together for a few minutes, ensuring everyone on that floor was moving out. When the hallway was nearly empty, Mercer approached me. We need to find the rest of the cell. If their plan was to cause structural collapse, there are still unexploded bombs. I nodded, my mind racing. You said they're called Division 13? Yes. Why? The 13th floor, I replied, suspicion rising. I thought it was strange how empty it was today, with only 2 establishments open on the grand opening day. Mercer's eyes widened with understanding. A perfect base of operation. Less movement, view of the entire mall, ... double quotes, and probably more explosives, I added. We need to go up. The emergency stairs, he suggested, already moving in that direction. I agreed, but first I had one more thing to do. I ran to a nearby electronics store, kicking the door open. What are you doing? Mercer asked, alarmed. Communication, I replied, rushing to the counter, where several walkie-talkies were displayed. I grabbed 2, quickly checking that they worked. "Smart," Mercer commented when I handed him one. "We're going to need help." My dad and other police officers are spread out throughout the mall. We tested the radios, setting them to Channel 7. "This is Officer Alexandra Carter," I transmitted. "Emergency in progress at Roosevelt Mall. Terrorist attack confirmed. Requesting immediate evacuation and tactical team." Repeat, "Terrorist attack in progress." There was no certainty that anyone was listening, but it was our best chance. "Let's go," I said to Mercer, and we ran for the emergency stairs. The staircase was congested with people descending, all in various stages of panic. Climbing against the flow was like swimming against the current. We used our badges and authority to clear the way, but it was slow and exhausting. On the 10th floor, another explosion shook the building, more violent than the previous one. Dust and small fragments of concrete rained down on us. Screams of panic intensified in the— "They're accelerating the plan," Mercer shouted. We reached the 11th floor, exhausted and dirty, but determined. The smoke was thicker here, stinging our eyes and lungs. 2 floors to the top, I coughed, checking my gun. The walkie-talkie crackled to life. "Alexandra? Is that you?" My father's voice, distorted by static but unmistakable. "Father!" I exclaimed with relief. "We're under attack." "Terrorist group, Division 13. They've already detonated several bombs, and we believe the 13th floor is their base." There was a tense pause. "Who's with you?" "Agent Mercer, FBI. I was undercover, monitoring the group." Another pause. "Alexandra, listen carefully. SWAT is on its way. ETA 15 minutes. Evacuation underway from the lower floors." "Where exactly are you?" "East emergency stairwell, going up from the 11th to the 12th. Let's check the 13th floor." "Negative." My father's voice boomed over the radio. "Stand by for the tactical team. This is a direct order." I looked at Mercer, who shook his head emphatically. "We don't have 15 minutes, he whispered. "If they detonate the main charges, ... I made my decision then and there. For the first time in my career, I would disobey a direct order from my father. "Father, people will die if we wait. We keep going up. Keep this channel open." I hung up before he could protest. Mercer looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "This could cost you your career, right?" "If we're wrong, yes," I replied, already starting to climb again. "If we're right and do nothing, it will cost lives." The choice is easy. The 12th floor was almost completely deserted, with most people already evacuated. The smoke was thickest here, reducing visibility to a few meters. "We need a plan," Mercer said, as we cautiously moved down the hallway toward the final staircase to the 13th floor. "Do you know your numbers?" "How many group members should be up there?" "At least 5, including the leader, a man named Drayson, ex-military, explosives expert." I absorbed the information, quickly formulating a plan in my mind. "Okay, we need caution and surprise. They probably don't expect someone to come from below with so much smoke. I'll go first, you cover me." Mercer nodded, his expression grave. As we reached the final staircase, we stopped to listen. Above us, we could hear voices, hurried, tense, giving orders. ... Final detonation in 8 minutes. ... All points confirmed, except north. ... I exchanged a meaningful look with Mercer. Our suspicions were correct. There were still more explosives, and we were running out of time. Slowly, as quietly as possible, we began climbing the last few flights of stairs. My heart was pounding so hard, I feared it might be heard. Sweat ran down my face, mixing with the soot and dust. We stopped just below the 13th floor. From there, I could partially see what was happening. 3 men and a woman moved quickly through the food court area, carrying backpacks and equipment. Large black bags, presumably containing explosives, were strategically positioned near structural columns. A 5th man, older and with a military bearing, oversaw the operation. "It must have been Drayson." "Plan?" Mercer whispered, so low I could barely hear. I picked up my walkie-talkie and whispered into the microphone. "Dad, we're in position. 5 suspects, 13th floor, food court. Explosives visible on structural columns. We need instructions to disarm them." The answer came almost immediately. "Alexandra, explosives team 10 minutes. Hold position and observe only." Frustrated, I replied, "Negative." They mentioned final detonation in less than 8 minutes. We don't have time. A muffled curse came over the radio, followed by, if there's standard C4 charges, look for colored wires connected to a digital detonator. Cutting the red wire will usually disarm the device. But, Alex, that's just theory. Every bomb can be different. Extremely risky. I swallowed, looking at Mercer, who had heard the entire conversation. I have some experience with explosives from my time in the army, he whispered. I can identify the type if I get a clear view. I nodded, formulating a quick plan. We need to create a distraction to separate the group. Then we neutralize them one by one. Or, Mercer suggested, we could activate the sprinkler system. Water can make it harder to detonate some types of explosives, and it can also create confusion. It was a brilliant idea. I looked up, spotting one of the smoke detectors near the stairwell entrance. I'll have to shoot him, I whispered. The noise will alert them. It's our best chance, Mercer replied. As soon as the sprinklers go off, I'll go left, you go right. Focus on disarming the explosives. I'll take care of the suspects. I took a deep breath, pointed my gun at the smoke detector, and fired. The sound of the gunshot echoed violently through the empty floor, immediately followed by alarmed shouts from the terrorist group. As expected, the sprinklers activated seconds later, unleashing artificial rain across the 13th floor. The fire alarm blared, deafeningly loud. Now, I yelled, and Mercer and I emerged from the stairs in opposite directions, using the overturned table for cover. Police! On the ground now! I yelled, pointing my gun at the surprised. 2 of them immediately drew weapons. Shots rang out in our direction, shattering the glass in the storefront windows behind us. Mercer returned fire, hitting one of the shooters in the shoulder. I stayed low, moving quickly between the covers, trying to reach the nearest explosive. It was a black backpack positioned against a central column, wires extending from it and connected to a small digital device. Drayson, the leader, was shouting orders. Detonate now. Abort the rest of the plan. One of the terrorists ran toward an open laptop on a table. Mercer, sensing the danger, directed his fire at him, forcing him to retreat. I took the opportunity to advance to the first device. Under the artificial rain from the sprinklers, I quickly examined the bomb. It was complex, several packets of plastic explosive connected to a digital detonator that read 547-546. Mercer! I yelled. Countdown active! Red wire! He shouted back as he exchanged fire with the terrorist. My hands trembled as I searched through the tangle of wires. A red wire connected the timer to the main power supply. Drawing my tactical knife, I cut it with one precise motion. The timer stopped at 5:22. An unarmed one? I shouted, already moving on to the next one. It was at that moment that I saw Drayson running toward the north exit with a similar backpack. He was escaping with one of the devices. Suspect fleeing with explosive. I radioed. Northbound, 13th floor. Intercepting came my father's surprising reply. I'm going up the north staircase. My heart leaped. My father was coming, reinforcements were arriving. Mercer had managed to neutralize another terrorist and was now working to defuse a second explosive. The remaining 2 were barricaded behind the counter of the Japanese restaurant, firing sporadically in our direction. I moved in a wide arc, trying to flank them. The sprinklers made the floor slippery and difficult to see. The alarm continued to blare, a disorienting cacophony. Approaching their position from a different angle, I could see a third explosive device strapped to a crucial column. This one looked different, more straightforward, perhaps a backup. I made a quick decision. Disarming this bomb took priority over pursuing the shooter. If the structure collapsed, the casualties would be countless. Taking advantage of a moment when they were both distracted by Mercier's fire, I launched myself into a low sprint toward the explosive. Upon reaching it, I dropped to the ground and slid the last few feet under the counter of a closed store. This device was simpler, just 2 packs of C4 connected to a manual detonator, no timer. There were only 2 wires, one red and one blue. Mercer! I shouted. 2-wire explosive, red and blue. Red! He shouted back. Always red on basic settings. With a prayerful sigh, I cut the red wire. Nothing happened, which was a good sign. Bomb defeat. 3 down, I don't know how many more to come. and Drayson was still out there with at least one device. My radio crackled. Visual contact with primary suspect, my father said, his voice tense but controlled. North corridor, heading for the roof. I'm in pursuit. On my way, I replied immediately, already moving in that direction. A shot passed dangerously close to my head, forcing me to take cover again. The two remaining terrorists were now on the move, trying to block my path to the north corridor. Go! Mercer shouted. I'll keep them busy. With a nod of thanks, I waited for Mercier's volley of gunfire and used the distraction to run down the north corridor. The shots followed me, shattering display cases and ricocheting off the walls, but I managed to round the corner unharmed. The north corridor was narrower, lined with closed shops still under renovation. At the end was a metal door with a sign that said Roof Access, authorized personnel only. I ran as fast as I could, my breath burning in my lungs. As I approached the door, I heard the sounds of fighting on the other side. I threw the door open, daylight momentarily blinding me after the smoky darkness inside. As my eyes adjusted, I saw my father and Drayson engaged in hand-to-hand combat near the edge of the roof. The backpack with the explosives was lying a few feet away. My father, despite his 52 years, was still a formidable fighter. But Drayson was younger, stronger, and clearly trained. As I watched in horror, Drayson delivered a brutal blow to my father's face, sending him staggering. Backward, police, stop or I'll shoot, I yelled, advancing with my gun pointed. Drayson whipped around, using my father as a human shield, a knife pressed to his throat. Put the gun down, officer, he ordered, his voice eerily, or your colleague here is going to have a very bad day. My father, blood streaming from a cut on his eyebrow, met my gaze. I saw in him not fear, but confidence. Confidence in me. He has a detonator in his right pocket, my father said tensely. It controls all the remaining charges. Drayson pressed the knife harder, making a small line of blood appear on my father's neck. I told you to put the gun down. I won't ask you again. I kept my aim steady, but my mind raced. Protocol said not to negotiate with terrorists, but this wasn't just another hostage, was my father. And if Drayson had a detonator, thousands of lives were still at risk. What's your goal here? I asked, stalling for time while I weighed my options. The mall is already being evacuated. Your plan has failed. Drayson smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. You think the mall was the target? This is just a demonstration. The beginning. Division 13 is just beginning its mission to purify this country. Let me guess, I replied, taking a small step to the side, looking for a better angle. You were betrayed by your country. The government is corrupt. No one understands your ideals. His expression hardened. Don't trivialize our cause, girl. Your precious system is rotten to the core. Sometimes the only way to rebuild is to tear it down first. As he spoke, I noticed my father's hand moving imperceptibly to his belt. He still had his pepper spray. I needed to keep him talking. And killing innocents as part of that reconstruction? I asked, taking another sidestep, positioning myself for a clear shot if the opportunity arose. Collateral damage. History will not remember them. Only the revolution we started here. My father gave me a barely perceptible look. He was ready. You know what's wrong with terrorists like you, Drayson? I said, adjusting my posture. You talk too much. At that moment, my father jerked his head back, hitting Drayson in the nose, and simultaneously deployed the pepper spray over his shoulder, hitting him square in the face. Drayson howled in pain, his knife hand involuntarily pulling away from my father's neck. That was all it took. I fired once, hitting Drayson in the shoulder of the arm holding the knife. He staggered back almost to the edge of the roof, the knife falling from his hand. My father lunged forward, knocking him to the ground with one precise blow. Within seconds, he was on top of him, pinning him down as I ran to help. The detonator, my father reminded, holding Drayson captive. I quickly searched Drayson's right pocket, finding a small black device with a single red button. I found. Drayson, even though he was overpowered and injured, began to laugh. You think it's over? Division 13 has cells all over the city, all over the country. This was just the beginning. I cuffed his hands behind his back, perhaps a little tighter than necessary. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it. The roof door opened again, and Mercer emerged, panting and covered in soot, but alive. "I've arrested the other two," he reported. "SWAT teams are on their way up now. Bomb squad is already on the 13th floor, disarming the remaining devices." I handed him the detonator. "Take this to them. Top priority." As Mercer hurried back inside, I helped my father to his face was bruised, one eye already beginning to swell, and the cut on his eyebrow was bleeding. "You need medical attention," he said, examining her injury. "I'm fine," he replied automatically, then paused, really looking at me. "You disobeyed a direct order, Alexandra." I held his gaze. "Yes, I disobeyed, and we saved thousands of lives because of it. To my surprise, a slow smile appeared on his bruised face. "Yes, we saved it." It was the first time he'd said we, instead of taking credit or berating me. I felt something shift between us in that moment, a new respect. "Your instincts were right," he continued as we walked back to the door, Drayson being dragged ahead of us. "You saw something suspicious and acted. Good job, police." I smiled, despite the exhaustion that was starting to take over me now that the adrenaline was subsiding. "I learn from the best," he snorted, but I could see the pride in his eyes. "You know you're still going to have to write a report explaining why you disobeyed orders, right?" "It's worth it," I replied as we descended the stairs to meet the tactical teams heading up. Roosevelt Mall had been successfully evacuated. Despite significant structural damage to the upper floors, no fatalities were reported. Only minor injuries during the evacuation. The swift response of authorities, including the decisive action of a rookie police officer and an FBI agent, had prevented what could have been one of the worst tragedies in recent Chicago history. Sitting in the back of an ambulance a few hours later, being treated for smoke inhalation and minor cuts, I watched the organized chaos around me. Rescue teams, police officers, firefighters, all working in perfect coordination. My father approached, his face now clean and with several stitches on his eyebrow. "The doctors say you need at least 24 hours of rest," he said, sitting down next. "I don't think I'll be able to sleep anytime," I replied honestly. He nodded, understanding. "Your first major operation. The adrenaline takes a while to wear off." We were silent for a moment, watching the scene. "Agent Mercer came to talk to me," my father finally said. "He said that without you, it would have been impossible to defuse the explosives in time. He said you kept a cool head under pressure, made quick decisions, and saved lives." I felt my face heat up at the backhanded compliment. I just did my job. My father turned to me, his expression softer than I had ever seen it. "No, you did much more than that. You proved me wrong." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "Wrong about what?" "About you," he admitted. "About letting the new guy leave. About women in the force. About so many things." It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get from him, and it meant more than any medal or official recognition. "Thank you, Dad," she said simply. He shrugged, quickly returning to his typical personality. "Don't get used to it. Tomorrow you'll hear about all the paperwork you'll have to fill out because of this." I laughed, feeling the tension of the last few days begin to dissipate. "I can't wait." Mercer approached us, now wearing an FBI jacket over his dirty t-shirt. "Officer Carter," he greeted me formally, extending his hand. "Thank you for saving my life back there. We couldn't have done it without you." I shook his hand. "Likewise, Agent Mercer." He smiled. "You have a bright future ahead of you. If you ever tire of the municipal police, the Bureau can always use someone with your instincts." My father snorted audibly beside me, making us both laugh. "I'll keep that in mind," I replied. When Mercer walked away, my father shook his head. "The FBI is always trying to steal our best," he grumbled, but without real irritation. "Don't worry," I assured her. "Chicago is my home. I don't plan on going anywhere." The chief of police then approached, his face grave but with a gleam in his eyes that I recognized as approval. "Officers Carter," he greeted us. "The press is clamoring for an interview with the heroes of the day. Normally I wouldn't approve, but in this case, I think it would be good for the department. Are you willing?" My father looked at me, a silent question in his eye. For a moment, I relived everything that had happened. The fear, the quick decisions, the constant danger. "Yes," I finally replied, "but on one condition." The boss raised his eyebrows, and what would that be? "Let it be recognized as a team effort. Not just the two of us, but Agent Mercer, the rescue team, everyone who helped." The chief smiled. I think we can pull that off, Officer Carter. As he walked away to set up the interview, my father looked at me with an expression he had never given me before: genuine respect. You know, he said thoughtfully, when your mom told me you wanted to join the gym, I thought it was just a phase, that you'd give up after the first week of physical training. Thank you for your trust, I replied sarcastically. Let me finish, he continued. So you not only completed the training, but graduated at the top of your class. Still, I thought real street work would be different, that you weren't ready. Today you proved you're more than ready. He held out his hand, a formal gesture that meant more coming from him than any hug. I'm proud to call you my partner, Officer Carter. I squeezed his hand, feeling a lump in my throat. Thank you, Sergeant Carter. We rose together, ready to face the camera, and the future no longer as father and daughter trying to prove something, but as partners, as equals. As we walked toward the throng of reporters, I reflected on how it all began, with my father scoffing. Let the rookie lead during a seemingly routine patrol at a mall. Who would have thought it would end this way? Sometimes you need a stuck elevator on the 13th floor to change everything.